Vitaliy Katsenelson, welcome to Partnering Leadership. I'm thrilled to have you in this conversation with me.
Mahan, my pleasure. Thank you.
Vitaliy, I can't tell you how much I loved reading Soul in the Game, The Art of a Meaningful Life. At the beginning, I was a little suspicious. There is this guy who is in value investing and has written a book on leading a meaningful life. And I saw the incredible quotes from General Stanley McChrystal and Nassim Taleb, both of them brilliant in so many different ways. I said, I gotta read this guy's book, and it didn't disappoint. So I'm really excited to have you in this conversation. Would love to first start out, though, Vitali, with your upbringing in Russia. You were born in Russia, made in America. What was that initial upbringing like?
Yeah. So if I wrote that chapter today, I would have said born in USSR, made in America because I'm so embarrassed for Russia. So I'm used to be proud to be born in Russia, but not anymore. Um. So I grew up in Murmansk, Russia, and Murmansk is a city located in the northwest Russia. And if you look on the map and if you look for Norway, just look for the northern tip of Norway. That's where Murmansk is. There's a very long winters, very short summers, very little sunlight. During the winter time. In fact, uh, I would argue that Murmansk makes Seattle look like a sunshine city. Um, so I was, I was grew up in Murmansk. My family moved to United States in 1991, and just wanted to notice the contrast because we moved not just to the United States, we moved to one of the sunniest cities and states, which is we moved to Denver, Colorado, which has a lot of sunshine. So the contrast between Murmansk and Denver could not be greater. And you could argue that was a similar contrast between growing up in Russia and moving to the United States because you suddenly go from this kleptocracy, corrupt, uh, empty stores, uh, little personal freedom to this free country. And that's basically kind of my thinking about kind of between moving from from Russia to United States. And I would argue that some people think that when you move to United States and as an immigrant, that's a disadvantage. I would argue that's a huge advantage. Yes, the first couple of years are difficult. You have to learn the language, you have to get used to the culture. But my God, that is a such a that seeing this contrast such an enormous. Uh, Let me see. You want to say, put so much oxygen in your engines, and it makes you want to work so much harder than everybody else. So so that's basically. So we moved to United States to United States in 1991, and I lived here, since.
Yeah, Vitaly, I wonder about that. I know you are also a proud parent of three kids. Parenting plays a big role in the stories that you tell also in the book, in that you appreciated a lot of the freedoms, opportunities, the access to food and sodas and everything else when you came to the US, in part because that wasn't available in USSR back then. And my wife and I always talk about the fact that there are things we as Iranian Americans
Mhm.
appreciate very differently than our girls do, having grown up with certain freedoms and certain access to all kinds of goods. So, how do you approach this as a parent of three kids that are growing up in the US so they have the same appreciation for the opportunities that you did?
There's a lot of value in scarcity. Like when you and if you and there's this and I sprinkled that throughout the book a little bit. Like when I talk about how and I'm going to answer your question, but when I talked about how when I was growing up in Russia, I think I had Coke or Pepsi once in my life, during Russia. And when I came to the United States, I was shocked that you can buy Coke here by gallons. So like in the first 3 years of my life in the United States, I consumed more coke than in the previous 30 years in 18 years in Russia. So and the the irony of this was that maybe when I was 21, I remember going to Village Inn and ordering a third refill of Coke. And while I was drinking it, I realized I could not really taste the sugar anymore because I drank so much of that. But that is the problem with abundance. You get used to it, and you get used to it, and you stop valuing it. So, like, I don't want my kids to kind of to go through experiences I went through in Russia, but it wasn't all negative because now I value things a lot more than they do. So how do I introduce them to scarcity? Well, my kids, as a parent, now they don't have a limited spending budget. So my daughter has she can spend $15 a week for food, which is she can go out a time and a half. Like she can go out to lunch maybe one and a half times. And I'm doing it on purpose because I want her to have this. She can take just let me make this point clear. My kids are not starving. They can, she can take lunch to school, um, or she can make this $15 go further. Or she can work and make her, and tutor chess. That's what she does, and she can make her own money. But I need to instill that value, that scarcity in them, and I could give her whatever money. I could just basically say, you can buy as many lunches as you want, but then she will not value them. So I kind of try to artificially today to instill a certain amount of scarcity in their life, so they appreciate it a lot more. I'll give you another example. Um, my two daughters are still in school, and once a month when I drive them to school, we stop by and get donuts. We do it only once a month because we could do it every day. We could do it once a week, but then they would not value that experience as much. But this one time a month when we do this, they really look forward to it. So that's you have to, when you live in a country of abundance, which is the United States, and abundance goes from being a feature to becoming a bug actually, then you have to artificially I have to insert that scarcity in my kids' lives.
And that's a great way to look at it as you try to have some of these same values that you had growing up. Now, I'm just curious though, you ended up changing majors half a dozen times when you were in college.
Mm,
How come you settled on finance and investing? I think your dad, who is an incredible painter,
mm,
some of the images of his paintings are in the book, had wanted you even to become open up a bagel shop or
that's
something.
right.
So why go into investing?
Yeah. So that's a great question. So I have to really make this point clear. My father, in addition to being a phenomenal artist, he has a PhD in electrical engineering. So this is a person of science with an incredible IQ, incredible amount of wisdom. And he always looked at investing, what I do, as a form of legalized gambling. This, when you were referring to the bagel shop, you're absolutely right, because my father thought for a long, long time, what I do is legalize gambling, and therefore I need a plan B. And he's like, well, what could be plan B? Something real. And he was like, maybe we should do a bagel shop. Like that was his way of looking at my profession. So a couple more caveats here. So when my first book, Active Value Investing, came out, that book, when I was writing it, subconsciously, I was really writing it so my father would read it and it would make him proud. And he would understand that what I do is not legalized gambling, that value investing is an intersection in science and art, but it is real. It's very tangible. Um, and so when the book came out in English, in the United States, it was published in 6 or 7 other languages, from Chinese to Romanian to Polish and others, but it was not published in Russian. So I reached out to Russian publisher and I said, I have this book. Would you guys want to publish it in Russian? They looked at it. They said, great. Let's we'll publish it. We'll connect with Wiley, the publisher. We'll get it done. But could you please edit it for us? I said, sure, why not? 8 months later, I get an email with the Word documents that my book they translated to Russian. Mohan, I start reading the book and I realized I understand every single word, but the sentences don't click with me. So I actually asked my father if he could edit the book. He said, sure. And I'll tell you, I was so lucky because my father going through the book and editing the book made him read every single word of the book. And after he was done with reading the book, he stopped telling me that I should open a bagel shop. Uh, but to answer your question, how I got into investing. So, in this, I think there is a lesson in this to everybody. When you're young, you really have, like, a lot of times you have an idea what you major, what you want to practice in life, but it's a theoretical knowledge. And when the theory meets practice, a lot of times you get disappointed. So I think you should try out different majors and do as many internships as you can, diverse internships, not just in one profession, multiple professions, and then realize and then figure out what clicks with you. So I dated 6 or 7 different majors, and I was lucky that, and I think there was a lot of luck to do. Like, the more majors, the more industries and professions you expose yourself to, the more luck you create. I was lucky that I was good with computers and I got a job at an investment firm. They hired me for my computer skills. Absolutely nothing to do with investing, for my computer skills. And at the same time, I was taking, I was kind of business major, which is very ambiguous. Like, I could have gone either direction. And I was taking prerequisite finance classes. And when I took finance classes, they really clicked with me. And I would discuss these concepts I learned at school, at work, with portfolio managers there. And these discussions really made the world of finance very exciting to me. And this is when I realized I actually want to do investing. And so I was lucky in the sense that relatively early in my life, maybe it was 22, 23, I changed my major for the last time to finance, and just got my undergraduate and graduate degrees in finance. I got my CFA designation. And this, like, when you have focus and hard work, it's very difficult but not to become successful. So I actually had focus, passion, and hard work. So
Yeah, and as you said, you created your own luck to a certain extent by exposing yourself to different opportunities and seeing what clicks with you. And you mentioned your first job, Vitali, and I think there is a great leadership story and example in that first job. A lot of the listeners are people that want to improve their leadership skills.
Mhm.
And how many years later is it, and how big of an impact has that first job had on you after you fried the database of the organization?
Yeah, yeah. No, so yeah, so I was good with computers, but what I did not say, I was good with software. Okay, but I was not good with hardware. And I forget. So we needed to change the video card on a computer, on a server, not just a computer, on a server. And, like, during, like, everybody's working, and I really just did not want to tell everybody to get off the server. So I tried to do a heroic thing and to change this video card on a running server. Like, by the way, when I say it today, it sounds completely idiotic. I could have been electrocuted on top of everything else. But anyway, so I'm changing this video card on the server, and I fry the server. It has all the data, everything. And this is like old days where computer, like, this is how people access the internet, everything. So that computer is gone. And this is when the kind of the leadership lessons of two founders of the company, so not a single one chewed me out. They just basically look at the problem and then they try to address the problem. They found a new server, brought in consultants to restore the backups. And one of them was just completely focused on trying to get the things fixed. Another one tried to make me feel better because he saw how miserable I was. And just a little bit of empathy, you realize that I did this not because I was it was no malfeasance on my part. I just really tried, I just had a childhood stupidity, I guess. And what I did was, there was no ill intent. And he really tried to make me feel better. And here's the interesting part. This was almost, I don't know, 27 years, 26, 27 years ago. And I was friends with one of them passed away recently. We were friends, had a very good relationship to the very end. And another partner, we are still friends with, and that's one of the longest friendships I have. And today, as a leader, I try to kind of do the same thing. When somebody makes a mistake, I understand, especially if I can see this was done out of just, I guess, ignorance, in my case, or just honest mistake. I try to make sure that this person does not suffer unnecessary, and that was a very, very important lesson for me.
And I think it's a powerful example, Vitaliy, because there's a lot of times when, as leaders, we say allow people to make mistakes, take chances, but reactions are different when something goes wrong, when things go wrong. Everyone wants those risks to be taken, but when things go wrong, their behaviors are different. So in this example, things had gone wrong and they behaved in the way you would want other people to behave.
No, I think that is a great point, and I think I learned this as a parent, and I learned it as a CEO, that kids, your employees, pay attention not just to what you say, but what you do. I think what you do, your actions are incredibly important. And I'll give you one example. I, when I make a mistake, I always I always tell people about this. And I tell them I made a mistake. And I tell them, by the way, this same applies to my kids and my employees. I tell them about the mistake I made and what I learned from it. And by doing that, I think I create a safe place for people to admit when they make mistakes and to people to learn from it. And also, it's very important that I want to create a culture here where people are comfortable, like they don't hide problems under the rug, but they bring them to the surface. And therefore, if you do this, you're going to deal with problems so much sooner. And that's something I learned, I guess, from I want to make a very interesting point. The two interesting developments that helped me tremendously in my life. One is being a parent, another one is writing. And I'm not sure which one helped me more. But as a parent, if you think about it, I have to teach my kids a lot, right? And by teaching them, I learn. And writing is kind of the same thing. When I write, I learn, right? Because what I have to do, writing is a concentrated, focused thinking. For me, I write 2 hours a day, every single day. And therefore, it forces me to think 2 hours a day, every single day. And so parenting and writing are probably the most important things that happened to me.
And that writing, I know, is really important to you, Vitaliy. It is important to me also. When did you come up with the fact that you need to sit down and do this focused writing? And why did you do it? You're again a very successful value investor. People typically wouldn't think of someone in your role sitting down and writing. For what purpose?
That's a
How
good
did you come
question.
up with it and why?
Like I'll be honest. I look at my life and it's just a whole bunch of accidents happening to me. And then I and I think I would argue that how accidents happen to all of us, good accidents and bad accidents, and then we have to take advantage of them. So so in 2004, I think I was done with my graduate school already for a few years. At this point, I've been teaching finance at CU Denver for a few years. And I already, after I taught finance for a few years, I already got bored with that too. Like the street.com was hiring writers. And there was a like they were probably the street.com was kind of at the time was almost like Saturday Night Live for a lot of comedians. And what I mean by this, if you think about some of the writers who went out and became big, like James Altucher came from the street.com, Barry Ritholtz, and many others, kind of started a career on the street.com. And so did I. Um, and they were paying almost nothing, and they were overpaying me because I knew nothing about writing. I had a CFA designation. I had a master's degree. I was doing investing thing for a living, and that's why they hired me. And I, over time, I fell in love with writing. It's just something that, like, I was born to do, I guess. And it also it took me a while to realize this, but it made me a much better investor, just because it made me think so much more about different topics than I would otherwise. And then I ended up writing two investment books, Active Value Investing and a little book on sideways markets. And just understand, working on the book, it's like it's just I don't know how many hours I spent on it. Thousands and thousands of hours I spent working on the book. That's again a lot of thinking. So yes, my profession, people are not supposed to write, but I would argue that's one of my superpowers. It made me so much better investor because and a human being because I started writing. And today I look as I used to be somewhat embarrassed for writing, meaning that I wanted people to take me seriously as an investor. Um, Today I basically look myself as a investor who writes, or as a student of life, or as many different identities. But writing is definitely one of my identities. And it benefited me tremendously.
And I think it's a practice everyone can take on, and it's not necessary to take 2 hours a day. One of the things I find, Vitali, is it becomes a second stage to reflection. Some people like to meditate, some people like to take silent walks, whatever it might be. Reflection. Writing forces you to formulate your thoughts and decide what you believe and what you don't, and try to communicate it. There's a lot of value in doing it that way, even to the point that Amazon still is very well known. I had a conversation with John Rossman, who's written a series of books on the Amazon way, on how before decision making meetings, people are to write 6-page
Memos, yeah.
memos,
Mhm.
and it forces them to really reflect rather than just speak off the cuff, which a lot of times happens. And then for people that read it to understand things better too. So I find it's a practice that can be helpful in all kinds of roles for all kind of leaders. And it's not necessary to start at the couple of hours a day level.
Oh, absolutely. No, I agree. And I think that what I do 2 hours a day, that's for a lot of people, that's too much. No, I would argue that you want to start with 5, 10, 15 minutes a day. One thing I would argue, to do daily. So you can create a habit. And what you need to do, you need to create a space. Space is a physical location where you go, where you feel comfortable, where hopefully there are very few distractions, and time. This is the time when you do this. This is where you go to do this, and make it as easy as possible. If you are writing while you're listening to music, as I do, make sure your headphones are right there, so easy to find them, and just create the space and start doing it every single day. Now, this is very important. A lot of times you show up to write and there is nothing. Like you walk away with a blank piece of paper, and that is absolutely fine. Because what you're doing, you're planting seeds in your subconscious. And your subconscious, one of those things that actually works 24/7 while you're sleeping, while you're walking, while you're taking a shower. And you have no idea when these seeds will bear fruit. I've been I've been working on this article, like actually the next chapter of the book. The book is already out, but I keep writing. And I've been working on this probably for 3 weeks. And yesterday I walked away from it knowing that there's something's not clicking. But I had like what I wrote, I wasn't really satisfied with that, but I walked away with such a ease, knowing that I didn't waste my time. I'll come up with the answer during the walk or the next day. And today I woke up this morning and I rewrote where I struggled, and it ended up being so much better, and I learned a lot. So that is a so my advice to a listener would be, when you start writing, be kind to yourself, because there will be times where when you just you produce absolutely nothing. And by the way, this could be happening for weeks. Some actually it happened to me for almost a month at one point. So, and when that happens, just realize you are in the planting season, and just unlike normal planting corn or whatever strawberries, you just don't know when the when the I don't know when the corn when the summer comes, so when the fall comes, whatever. So that's important. See, this is a problem, me knowing nothing about about agriculture. Because now I have to think about, okay, so I think probably August. So you don't know when the August is gonna come or whatever, the strawberries are ready.
When you come to DC area, Vitaliy, I'll take you to my brother's farm on Kent Island on the other side of Chesapeake Bay, and he will teach you all about farming. But in all seriousness, Vitaliy, so you have this writing practice. You wrote a couple of books that are related to your space and value investing.
Yeah.
Now, The Art of a Meaningful Life is more of a life philosophy book. Why write a life philosophy book?
So let me agree with you and disagree at the same time. I think the soul in the game, the art of a meaningful life, is the book about investing, but investing in your life. So okay, but it is, yeah, okay. So but it is
That's a beautiful way of putting it.
all right. However, okay, that's so after been writing for a while, um, and after I became a parent, little by little, I started to introduce stories about my life. And in the beginning, there was just a few paragraphs that would insert in my emails that would send out to readers. And what happened over time, I started to receive emails from my readers saying, Vitaliy, I came to you for your investment insights, but I'm really staying for your life stories. And I'll be honest, this is very important to understand. As a writer, that provides me so much confidence to actually continue to write about life. Because as you mentioned, I have two finance degrees. I do investing for a living. So me writing about investing, it feels natural. I I didn't get a liberal arts degree. Okay. I didn't study philosophy in school. What do I know about writing about life? I read the same parenting books everybody else did. And so, but over time, as I gained self-confidence, I started to write a lot more about this. And again, writing made me think a lot more about these topics as well. And that's how I got the confidence to write this book.
And you know what I find interesting, Vitaly, as I was reflecting on it, because I wasn't familiar with your work in investing before reading the book. And in reading the book, I felt a sense of connection to who you are. And to me, this relates very well to a lot of aspects of leadership as well. One of the people I repeatedly talk about who's done a magnificent job on many different levels in leading the organization is Satya Nadella at Microsoft.
Mm-hmm.
He does a brilliant job of telling part of his life story, part of his struggles, part of his authentic self. And that helps people, whether it's in the organization or their clients, connect better with Microsoft and Satya Nadella. It doesn't substitute for the competence of the strategy, but there is a trust that is placed in the person because even though I've never met Nadella, I feel like I know him because I know some of his stories, some of what makes him tick. And I think to a certain extent, your clients and your community appreciates this about you. You are great at value investing, but this also enables them to connect to Vitaliy as the human being, that human connection rather than just connection on the competence.
I think that's very, very important because so when you think about my business for a second, IMA, what we do basically, we are a money management firm. We're a value investment money management firm. People basically come to us and say, Vitaliy, or the firm, here's my life savings. Please don't screw it up. So it's a lot more than just somebody buying your product that costs $50, even $100. A lot of times we manage millions and millions of dollars for people. And the trust, they like I every time you get a new account, I feel a little bit humbled because the trust required for somebody to kind of hand over their life savings to me is absolutely incredible. And when people do this, they don't just do it because of my skills, but they also, but that's very important. I'm not dismissing that, but they also do it because they trust me as a human being. Because that is such a, like, there's when you real estate agent helps you to buy a house, they help you to buy something very tangible. When somebody when somebody gives us the money to manage, there's a lot of intangibility. Like, what we do is incredibly intangible. Therefore, trust is everything. And I think when you learn, and by the way, I'm not like, this is not some kind of marketing ploy, because I wouldn't be able to do, like, I'm not that good. This is just me. Like, when I write articles, when I wrote this book, this is just me being me. Like, the person you read in the book is the same person you would meet on the street. Um, but that, I find that's been very important to us as a business, that people can relate to me. And by the way, and also, like, usually founders build a culture of the firm. I'm not a founder of the firm, but I would look at myself as a kind of founder 2.0, because IMA is 40 years old. I've been with the company for 25 years. And today, IMA reflects my values as an individual. And so, therefore, I think that's another reason why people feel comfortable with us.
And it is important to be able to tell those stories, Vitaly. And as you said, it's not a marketing strategy. However, that connection with the founder's story, or in this case, your story in leading the organization, and your story as the person that is making these investments on behalf of your investors itself helps increase the trust level. All I'm saying is that I felt a greater level of trust for you, knowing some of your stories, whether personal struggles in raising your kids or otherwise, that helps with that connection. Now, the book uh, has a lot of great insights, and almost I felt like I could go to different chapters, read each one a small book by itself. Would love to touch on a couple of areas that really resonated with me. One is, you are a big fan of mental models also. And some of the ones that you mentioned really resonated with me, whether myopic circles. I hadn't reflected on it as much before reading this. So, how did you come to mental models? And as we are leading our lives, not on the investment or business front, to have more soul in the game, what are the mental models that you think are most applicable?
Um, Interesting. So, if you think about anybody who writes, tells stories, they are in constant search for mental models, because when you tell a story, like, a lot of times just an analog. You are taking you want to say, you want to make a point, but you need to find a vessel to make this point. So you tell a story through something, through an analogy. So a lot of times mental models are like that. The Like myopic circle, a mental model. I realized about this mental model actually originally when during the pandemic, when vaccinations were happening, and I discovered that like everybody around me was vaccinated. But then, like, there's very few exceptions, people who like could not do it for medical reasons, like for true medical reasons. But then people who were not vaccinated on principle or whatever, the those people would know a lot more people, exposed to a lot more people who are not vaccinated. So when you are when I look at the world from my prism, my myopic circle, that created my myopia, like very narrow circle. I thought everybody's vaccinated, and then I realized that if that for me to understand how the world works, I need to be able to step out of my circle into other circles. And that applies, it help me a lot with investing, because when a lot of times when I analyze companies, I can't relate to the product because the product hasn't been designed for my demographic or for my social graphic, etc. And like I'll give an example, like we own tobacco stocks. Like I don't know a single person, like I don't have a single friend who smokes. There's zero judgment here. It just I aspire to certain type of values, and those values conflict with smoking. Okay, there's nothing wrong with somebody who smokes. Um, now if you find a person who smokes, they're probably going to own a lot more people who smoke. So, we own tobacco stocks, and yes, there are 14% of Americans who actually smoke. So that's another example of myopic circles. And so that's an example of a mental model that helps you to analyze. What mental models help you to do is it's a thinking shortcut. It allows you to analyze something so much quicker because you see parallel, from here to here. Um, so the soul in the game, if you think about it, this is kind of the most important chapter in the book. That is a mental model. That's what it is. It's a mental model that how I aspire to lead my life. Okay, I want to have to soul in the game in as many parts of my life as I can. Like I wanted to have it in something I spend my whole day, which is investing and some in writing. Okay, so I want to have soul in the game there. I also wanted to have the way I parent my kids. So soul in the game is this attitude where it becomes part of your identity. So they like if I like, for instance, let me give an example. If investing is part of my identity, it's basically it's my natural extension. It's something I'm incredibly passionate about. It's going to be very difficult for me to do something that's going to hurt my clients, because to me that's more important than money. To me, it's a it's I'm if I'm hurting my clients, I'm basically not having soul in the game. Then I'm harming myself. So this is kind of that's it. Soul in the game is a mental model basically, and for which I used to lead my life.
Yeah, so to soul in the game, I wonder, Vitali, when do we not have soul in the game? One of the challenges is a lot of times I find when we reflect on our lives, we feel like we have soul in the game. So when is it lacking? What are examples of when people don't have soul in the game?
When when you have, like, an example, when you have a job and you don't care for it, when you go to work and you don't want to be there, when you when you do something solely for money, and the creative process or the process of creating this has a little meaning to you. um Let me give you this very little example. This is how I used it in parenting. My daughter Hannah, she's 16. She's very good at chess. She's actually, she's winning me in chess, which frustrates me a little bit. Um, and she started to teach chess lessons. And she's teaching chess lessons, and she was gonna have her first lesson of an 8-year-old girl. And like a day or two before she had this lesson, I talked to her. I said, "Have you prepared for the lesson?" She's like, "Nah, I kind of know what I'm gonna teach." And I said, "Realize you're gonna have a huge impact on this 8-year-old girl. If you prepare or not, if you have passion for this or not, this is going to determine if this girl is going to love chess for the rest of your life or not. The impact you have on her is absolutely incredible. So this money that she's going to pay you, you're going to spend this money very quickly. But the impact you're going to have on her is going to be long lasting. So you should have soul in the game when you do this, or just don't do it." That's just an example of that.
Yeah, and I love that example, and I love again the parallel with Nassim Taleb's skin in the game, in that there is a level of ourselves that has to be involved in what we choose to do, whether it's for fun, it's parenting, for work, it's our soul as a part of it rather than a distant observer.
No, I think that this observer is a perfect analogy for that. Yes, and by the way, I gotta give Nassim a credit. I was reading his Skin in the Game, which is like, so I'm a huge fan of Nassim Taleb, um, and I was reading his Skin in the Game, and he had this chapter there, which almost felt like it was a throwaway chapter, like Soul in the Game. And I'll tell you, I read this chapter, and I was like, and by the way, I'm speaking on Nassim's behalf. That when I say it was a throwaway chapter, maybe he thought that was the most important chapter. I don't know this. I should ask him actually. Um, but I read this chapter, and that I had such a aha moment. And let me tell you why. Because my industry, so let's talk about skin in the game a little bit. Skin in the game is basically where you share not just the upside, like with your clients, but also the downside. In my investment industry, is so famous, or infamous, actually, I would argue, for not having skin in the game. Wall Street will come up a poisonous product that they'll sell to you because you want to buy it, but they would never eat, they would never consume it themselves. Okay. If you have skin in it, so they would enjoy the upside of that, of selling it, but they would never suffer the downside when it blows up. So when you have skin in the game, you enjoy not just the upside, but you suffer the consequences of the downside as well. And to me, that is incredibly important. As an example, most of my liquid net worth is invested in the same stocks my clients do. Like this is a significant amount of money. The reason it's important is that when I buy a stock, if that stock is not going to work out, it's not because I didn't care. It's because bad things happen. So if I make a mistake, it's never going to be because of indifference. And I cannot tell you how important that is to my clients.
That is incredibly important. And I love the way you described skin in the game and its connection to soul in the game. And I think we can all become better leaders by even reflecting our soul in the game in the leadership. So I love the thinking behind that, Vitaliy, and the reflection on how we can have greater soul in the game, like skin in the game, rather than disassociating ourselves and again saying work is work. I am a different person, to trying to separate it. If you have soul in the game, what you're doing, as well as your parenting, whatever else, is a part of who you are. You lose when the others lose.
So it's very difficult to have a meaningful life if you don't have soul in the game. I would say it's impossible.
So, in the soul in the game, you also mentioned a couple of different things I want to touch on. One, you talk about set your egg timer to 6 months. On the other hand, you don't eat dessert. So, my question is, if you set your egg timer for 6 months, shouldn't you be eating dessert every day and enjoying every day?
Oh my God. So it's like, I never had this question posed to me this way. It almost sounds like they are contradicting each other, but they're not. Okay. So So there is this terrific book called The Last Lecture. Last Lecture by, God, I'm going blank on the name, but Randy Pausch. And Randy, by the way, if you're listening to this podcast, you're watching it, after you're done with this, go on YouTube and just watch Last Lecture, Last Lecture by Randy Pausch. It's going to make you cry. And it's one of the best 40 minutes you're going to spend in your life. So Randy was a teacher at Carnegie University. He was 44 years old when he was diagnosed with cancer. I forget which type, but it was one of those cancers where you are healthy until suddenly you're not. It's like, so when he did this lecture, he was in a perfect health. I think he did 30 push-ups on stage. But he was basically saying, I got 6 months to live. So when in Carnegie Mellon, when they do a last lecture, usually it's not literal. It's not, it's a, when a professor is about to retire, but still has a long life ahead of him. This was literally, his last lecture. He only had 6 months to live. And in the book, so it was turned into a book. And in the book, he tells a story that really stuck with me. So, and Randy bought a new car, a new convertible, and this is before he got married. And he went to pick up his niece and nephew, and he was going to take him to amusement park. And his sister saw that he has a new car, and she told his kids, make sure to eat carefully in the car. Don't dirty Uncle Randy's car. And while she was saying it, Randy opened a bottle of Coke and just looking at his sister, spilled this bottle of Coke on the back seats of the car. And his sister was absolutely stunned. He said, "This is just a car. It's just a piece of metal. It doesn't matter." So what happens with us in life, we value material things too much. We spend too much of our energy on material things. And I'd like to pause and think for a second. So this story happened. This Randy's book came out maybe 12 years ago. This story happened maybe 15 years ago. Where is Randy's car today? Randy's gone. Randy died. He lived not for 6 months, for about 11 months. But where is Randy's car today? That convertible? It's probably in some kind of junkyard. Does it even matter that it has, dirty, back seats or not? It makes no difference. And I think in life, if you go through life with an attitude that you have 6 months to live, then suddenly things that are material things, like how dirty our car is, how if it got dented, etc. If our house is has a perfect paint job, etc. Those things become a lot less important, and that energy we save from worrying about these things, we can redirect them to things that are more important to us, which is relationships. That was that lesson. This is where, so this is kind of, I mentally, like whenever something happens to me, I think, it doesn't matter if I only had 6 times to live. And I remember the story in the book. I talk about this, how this story came to me because we were flying from Europe to Denver, and I bought some knickknacks for my kids at the airport, and I left them there. And I got upset, and got upset for about a few minutes, and then I was talking with my brother. I was telling him the story about Randy, and suddenly those knickknacks became so unimportant. My kids did not even miss them because they never knew I got them for them. So that's the 6 months. The I don't eat desserts is a slightly different concept, but what it does, there's a couple things that it so I almost have to break it up into 2 stories. First of all, I need to explain the value of scarcity. You and I both talk about scarcity, right? Well, if you eat ice cream every single day, you won't appreciate it. If you eat cookie every single day, you won't appreciate it. So I found that for me, and again, this is just a personal choice, I will be healthier if I don't eat red meat. I eat, I don't need pasta and carbs. So when I'm in Denver, I don't eat red meat, pasta, uh, uh, cookies, desserts. So, and but here's the thing: if I had to make a decision every single time when it was offered to me, that would consume a huge, that would consume a huge amount of energy, right? Because what it would do to me every single time, I would have to make a decision not to eat them. So I told myself that I am the person who does not eat desserts. So I make a half binary decision. So when somebody offers me steak, my mother-in-law, this is the conversation with my mother-in-law that happens every 2 months. She's like, Vitaliy, I made this wonderful shish kebab. Would you like some? I said, I don't eat steak. She's like, no, but just one piece. I said, you don't understand. If I have one piece, I'm gonna eat all of it. So therefore, I'm a person who does not eat desserts and or steak for this in this case. However, and this is important. And the key point here is this: when I do this, it consumes very little energy because it's a half binary decision. Now, when I travel, and I kind of did this math and realized I travel for about 1 month a year. This is business travel, this is vacation with family, etc. So it's about 8% of the time. When I travel, I have absolutely no rules. Everything goes. I can eat steak every day if I want to. And I tell you, that kind of artificially infused scarcity makes me appreciate this every bite of that ice cream of that steak so much more, so much more. And that's basically that's how that's how I go through life, I guess.
And actually, I think that they both complement each other in that to a certain extent, I see a lot of stoicism in both of the thoughts. On one level, it is the scarcity of the moments and life. On the other level, the fact that a certain level of scarcity in your life allows you to appreciate the special moments even more. So I do see the interrelatedness of those two thoughts.
It's a great point because the Stoics have this practice called negative visualization, which is all it is. You just basically you you admit to yourself that there's a scarcity in life, and you admit to yourself that bad things do happen, and helps you to prepare for them when they happen. Um, and while you're doing this, it makes you appreciate what you have so much more. I'll give you an example. My two daughters, my oldest one, my oldest daughter is she's 16. She basically has 2 years left in school. That's it, 2 years. In 2.5 years, she's going to go to college. So every day I drive her to school, I I have this realization that I like there's only 400 more times I'm going to drive her to school. That's about it. After that, she won't need me to drive her to school. She'll be driving herself to college. And in the past, I would look as driving her to school as a chore. Today, I have this deep appreciation for that. And I look at it as the gift. And all I just did, by the way, same activity, driving to school hasn't changed, but understanding the scarcity, understanding that this is not forever, has changed my perspective completely. Just one little thing. Just so a lot of times, our life, this is what I love about Stoic philosophy. This little exercise of reframing can change your life dramatically.
Yeah, and I love that because Vitaliy, a lot of times, partly because of the term stoic has become associated with people that don't show any emotion. So stoic philosophy is misunderstood in part because of that. And I think that is such a beautiful example with you driving your daughter to school. And it really made me reflect a lot, whether it's my daughter's activities, volleyball, swimming, whatever else, with respect to it is not stoicism or stoic in the dictionary definition of not having emotions. It is the Stoic perspective of the limited scope of time that we have, which allows us to be more present in those special moments. So, if anything, it allows us to appreciate the moment more, have more joy in the moment, rather than not have emotions.
Oh, absolutely right. And I would argue that what it does, it helps you to minimize your negative emotions by reframing, um, and and therefore it also enhances your emotion. It's like almost adding MSG to your life, to the good portion of your life, and minimizing the negative part of your life. Yeah. I
So
never thought
you
about
had
this way. MSG. Yeah, that's what Stoicism for me. MSG.
so you had written a book. You paused it for almost a year to write more on Stoicism, which I think is a great section in the book. But it sounds like your mother-in-law, after reading the book, told you you might need to practice it a little bit more yourself.
Oh, absolutely. That was, and I think, and that's a great point. This is a very important point. This is a very important point. Stoic philosophy, it should be called the really Stoic practice, because there's this great Asian proverb, and this is when we usually say this when we don't know the origin of this. It could have been authored by Lumberjack John, but but do you really are you gonna really trust a proverb by Lumberjack John? No. Okay, but the proverb goes like this: knowing and not doing is not knowing. Knowing and not doing is not knowing. If you read about Stoic philosophy, if you either in my book or other books, and you don't practice it, then and don't practice it, then it's almost like if you never read it. That's why, because what you do when you practice Stoic philosophy, you're trying to rewrite your operating system, the operating system that the little decisions you've written for decades. And so this process, guess what? You're gonna fail many times. I failed plenty, and as my stepmom would mention, would tell everybody, I failed plenty, and then what I try to do when I fail, I try to admit to myself, learn from it, and keep going forward. If the more I practice, the less I'm gonna fail. That's all.
And that's part of what helped your story and your examples resonate even better with me, Vitali, in that it's the authenticity of the ongoing struggle of the practice that you go through yourself also. That's, I think, the right approach. So, outstanding section on Stoic philosophy. Would like to quickly touch on a couple of other areas. I love your thoughts on the role that struggle plays in growth. How did you come up with reflecting on struggle adding value rather than subtracting from life? Most of us don't look forward to struggle, Vitali.
Well, and I'll be honest, I still look as much to struggle as everybody else. That's not quite true. Today I have a slightly different perspective. When I go through struggle, um, I realized this is a learning opportunity for me. I let me. I'm going to tell you a slightly different story. I have a fellow working with me who is absolutely incredible employee. He's incredibly organized. He is he's perfect at his job. I gave him a task that requires a little bit more creativity, and he's been really taking it very seriously. And creativity is not something that he's used to, and not something that required in his normal tasks. And I was talking to him a couple of weeks ago, and he was incredibly frustrated. And this task I gave him, there was a lot of creativity in this, and you need to come up with a solution because we installing this new software and it requires the design of this different things. And he was telling me how frustrated he is, and I said, "This is a normal part of creative process. This frustration, that is a good thing. I know right now it feels horrible because you are you have this, and this is, by the way, this is part of creative process. On one side, you have the curiosity because you want to see how it's going to come, how you're going to solve it. On the other side, you have this fear that you won't be able to solve it, and this tug of war of these emotions. That is what kind of creative process is. And once you become aware that's what's going on, that actually reduces the pain a little bit, because you realize that it's, if you well, and you actually, you get to appreciate this after a while, after you solve problems for a while. But you have to have a little bit of faith, and that faith usually created by past successes. But once you start seeing that this is part of creating process, it doesn't, it's not as it's a little bit, becomes a little bit less frustrating, and the curiosity starts to win, over the fear, over that fear. And so that is, so now he's actually, I was talking to him a couple of days ago. He's much calmer about this. He is more at peace, about this process. So, but if you go through life, it's impossible not to fail, not to fail at something. And I would argue those failures are opportunities. They're opportunities for us to grow. Because when you fail, and in the book, I'm talking about how I had a very difficult year in 2015. That failure made me grow as an investor. Because what failure does, it's almost like it exposes all the weaknesses you have in your process, and you start seeing your weaknesses so much better. I think Bill Gates said that or somebody said that failure is so much better teacher than success. And that's exactly right, because it exposes your weaknesses, and then what you can do, you can improve your process, and the next time you will fail less and less and less. So anyway, that's how I look at failure.
It's a great way to look at it, and a tip of the hat again to Nassim Taleb in Anti-Fragility, in that failure helps you become stronger oftentimes. We don't like it. We don't like the setbacks. It's tough going through that struggle, but that struggle can lead to growth. Now, you also mentioned the origin of the word abracadabra in Hebrew. I will create as I speak. I love that. I always said abracadabra, cadabra, but not just the origin of it, the meaning of it in Hebrew, but most especially the point that you make with abracadabra.
Um, so when we go through life, a lot of times what we think, our identity, unfortunately, is formed by random experiences, by random conversations we have, by random arguments. What you think about your key issues a lot of times is formed not because you looked at both, like, two or three sides of the argument, and you came to this conclusion thoughtfully, just because you start to argue with somebody, and the thought into your mind, and that's the position you took, and now you have a hard time giving up that position. Again, I create as I speak. You created your identity. You create your identity as you speak. You create, so my argument would be, you should be very thoughtful about you. You should go back and re-examine your values, and see if some of them are, do you really believe in them, or they were created through an argument. And 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 so when you, what's a good way to put it, when you before something becomes your value, you need to really examine it. I guess that's I guess, sorry, I'm sorry, this is one of those things where you need to scratch this, but anyway,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so
We'll
that's,
take
I
it on.
think, yeah, so, but I think that's it, yeah.
It is outstanding. Again, I love behavioral economics and have had lots of conversations with people that talk about the psychological aspects of it. But this one word for me captured a lot of those things and has made it very memorable because it's so true that once we voice something, maybe in an argument, maybe by accident, maybe for whatever reason, we are creating a belief system oftentimes that then we end up looking for data and confirmation bias to support. So there is a lot that comes as a result of us creating when we speak and then spending a lifetime confirming and supporting what we spoke, whether by accident or for whatever reason at the moment in time.
That's right. And I think you should go through, I think this is the point I want to make. I think you should go through life in a kind of in a scientist mode where everything you look at is a hypothesis, and then you carefully analyze that. And then after thorough analysis, it becomes, it becomes what you think. And you should be even more careful when it becomes your identity. But almost you should not link ideas to your identities, period, actually. Like, in other words, you should be able to, ideas should live in a separate space from your identity because it's very difficult for us to change our identity. And that's a good thing. And therefore, we should be incredibly careful that ideas live in a kind of in this their own sandbox, basically, from our identity.
Vitaliy, I know you have many more books in you, and we've just touched the surface of Soul in the Game. So much brilliant content in there. And in many instances, I found myself, again, reflecting and thinking deeply based on what you had shared and the stories that you shared, which I really, really appreciated. I couldn't recommend the book highly enough. How best can the audience, we will put in the show notes links to the book and everything else. How else can the audience find out more about you and the book?
Yeah. So if they go to soulinthegame.net, soulinthegame.net, um, there actually there are instructions how you can get new chapters that I wrote after the book already came out, because I just can't stop writing. I just keep writing and writing and writing. So keep writing new chapters. Also, we have a podcast, and the podcast basically my articles read to you, and articles about investing, life, classical music, Stoic philosophy. And you can listen to them if you go to investor.fm, like FM radio, or just look for Intellectual Investor Podcast on wherever the podcasts are available. And finally, like to enjoy full experience of my writing, you really should subscribe to my articles, because my articles have my father's artwork, classical music, etc. And you can do this if you go to contrarianedge.com, contrarianedge.com.
I've become a big fan of the articles and listened to some of the conversations on your podcast also. Especially enjoyed the comparison between Bezos and Jack Welch, who I think now there are many more books coming out on Welch and how he single-handedly contributed to the downfall of GE. While he was there, he was being celebrated as this heroic figure with the wrong measure. So you have an outstanding perspective on those two also.
I have another article I'm thinking about writing on this topic. And I think in part that why Jack Welch was so celebrated, because there's in part because General Electric owned CNBC. And that was the biggest cheerleader of Jack Welch and GE. So it helped them actually, like if you think about it, there was no way to prove it otherwise, but if they did not own CNBC, our perception of Jack Welch might have been different, partially. Number one. Number two, what I realized? There is whenever we think of CEO, there was a Mark Hurd. He used to be CEO of Hewlett Packard, and he was very respected CEO. He passed away, unfortunately, a couple of years ago. And he was a very respected CEO. And then when he left, Hewlett Packard's business fell apart. Literally 6 months later, it had huge problems. And people said, see, he left and the business fell apart. And what people were saying, how important he was to the company, and how great CEO he was. And to me, that was the opposite argument, because that showed that he did not build a sustainable company. A true CEO builds systems and culture that can function without him. And if you think about Jack Welch, he basically left a power keg when he left General Electric that was just waiting for the crisis to explode. Um, and he also built a culture that is that's based on short term, on a very short, I can't even say the word, very short term culture, beat the earnings culture, where Jeff Bezos doesn't even know how to spoke quarterly earnings. And I remember listening to Bezos conference call when somebody congratulated them on the latest quarter, and he said, I don't think you understand. This quarter was really, kind of is a reflection of decisions we made 3 years ago. So, and what it really teaches you that a lot of times, um, to make, when you to make decisions for long term, you have to sacrifice short term profitability, because you have today's outflows for the future returns, and that's kind of embedded in the culture of Amazon, not in the culture of GE. Maybe that culture has changed since they have a new management, but that's the culture of GE that brought it to it, kind of this short termism and lack of investment, and that's what basically ruined GE. And I would argue Jack Welch should not be going in a wall of fame, but wall of shame.
Yeah, so that's why I wonder, for final question, Vitaliy, from a leadership perspective, when you invest at all different levels in organizations, there are lots of different things you look at. Let's put that and the investment advice to the side. When you look at a leadership in an organization, whether the CEO, senior team executives, or the people, what are the leadership practices that you would like to see in organizations that would be pluses as you look to invest in them?
Well, I want them to have, it's going to sound very banal and trite, to have soul in the game. I want those people not to have a short-term time horizon, but to have a long-term time horizon. I do also want them to have a skin in the game, so I do want them to own a lot of stock. And what I do, this is how I changed as an investor over the years. I started to appreciate the value of people a lot more. So now it's very important for me to listen to conference calls. And a lot of times I'm not even listening. I'm listening to how management thinks. Are they long-term oriented or short-term oriented? Are they with the company as a temporary steward of capital, or they're making decision for the period after they're gone? That's a very 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 different uh, uh, different behaviors.
Really appreciate those thoughts. And as I mentioned, a couple of people that I highly admire and respect, Carl Bernstein had said about the book, No Ordinary Self-Help Tome. I've never read anything quite like it. That's high praise coming from Carl Bernstein. Nassim Nicholas Taleb, who is one of, in my view, most insightful philosophers, thought leaders, all kinds of things outside of all of his investment perspectives, said deep, insightful, inquisitive, and civilized. And then General Stanley McChrystal, who has a brilliant book, Team of Teams, and I think has done a magnificent job reinventing himself
Mm-hmm.
and leadership, said about your book, one of those much needed reminders that we are the architects of how we live. Thank you so much for joining the Partnering Leadership conversation and sharing some of your perspectives on your outstanding book, Vitaliy, Soul in the Game, The Art of a Meaningful Life. Thank you, Vitaliy Katsenelson.
Well, thank you so much. You're such a wonderful host. I really really enjoyed it. Thank you again. Thank you.
Thank you.